Coming in at number 5, Ygolonac. Ygolonac is a great old one and the god of perversion and depravity. Not just average human perversions or depravities, but any that can be conceived of by a sapient being. His demeanor is much like that of Nyarlathotep, but he is much more perverse and sadistic. It is said that he is imprisoned behind a wall of bricks in unknown ruins. His true form is uncertain, but when he possesses a human host to manifest, he appears as a grotesquely obese man, lacking a head or neck, with a mouth in the palm of each hand. However, unlike other deities, this monster is capable of understanding humans, to the point of being able to conduct a conversation in English through his human host. Now, it should be noted that Ygolonac is not a creation of Lovecraft, but one from horror writer Ramsey Campbell. However, he still exists in the Lovecraft mythos. It is said that just the very utterance of his name summons Ygolonac. I quote, "Even the minions of the Cthulhu mythos dare not utter the sounds that define the name, Ygolonac, for fear of conjuring the great defiler from its abstracted prison of bricks in some nameless place. One more to walk amongst those who have the capacity for sanity and rational thought. With vile possession it can take any host, with the singular hunger to rape, consume and destroy all that it covets most, but never sought." Very creepy indeed. Coming in at number 4 we have Azathoth. To quote H.P. Lovecraft in The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, outside the ordered universe is that amorphous blight of nethermost confusion which blasphemies and bubbles at the centre of all infinity, the boundless demon sultan Azathoth, whose name no lips dare speak aloud and who gnaws hungrily in inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time and space, amidst the muffled, maddening beating of vile drums and the thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes. Now, Azathoth, oftentimes called the blind idiot god, is an outer god. It is said that there can be no definite description of Azathoth because everybody envisions him differently, and he is forever changing. There is, however, evidence the physical manifestation of Azathoth in the universe is continuous, with a spot in the central region of the galaxy, otherwise known as Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Among his many followers, the worshippers in the town of Goatswood that practice obscene rites that involve atrocities practiced on still living victims in Azathoth's conical temple are insects that fled the destruction of their home planet, bringing the temple across the universe with them. Coming in at number 3, Yog-Sothoth. To quote H.P. Lovecraft in the Dunwich Horror, Yog-Sothoth knows the gate, Yog-Sothoth is the gate, Yog-Sothoth is the key and guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old and where they shall break through again. He knows where they have trod earth fields and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. Now, Yog-Sothoth is a cosmic entity and outer god born of the nameless mist, and is the progenitor of Cthulhu, Hasta the Unspeakable, and the ancestor of the Vormi. He is also the father of Wilbur Whateley. Like many Lovecraftian gods, Yog-Sothoth has many different forms throughout the various different stories in the mythos. However, there is some common agreement that he usually manifests as a mass of glowing orbs, with eyes or tendrils in some versions, and in others simply orbs. Not only that, but he is locked outside of the universe, meaning that he can know and see all of space-time all at once, meaning there is no secret hidden from Yog-Sothoth. So remember that one memory that makes your entire body cringe? Yog-Sothoth knows about it. One particular case involving the town of Dunwich, Yog-Sothoth is known to have been summoned for the purpose of impregnating a human female, who then went on to give birth to 2 partially human children. Coming in at number 2 we have Nyarlathotep. To quote H.P. Lovecraft, "And where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare." Nyarlathotep is known by his epithet, the Crawling Chaos, and is an outer god in the Cthulhu mythos. He is the spawn of Azathoth and a creation of Lovecraft, first appearing in his prose poem Nyarlathotep back in 1920. He is described in the dreams in the witch house as, I quote, "a tall, lean man of dead black coloration, wholly devoid of either hair or beard, and wearing as his only garment a shapeless robe of some heavy black fabric. His feet were indistinguishable because of the table and bench, but he must have been shod since there was a clicking whenever he changed position. The man did not speak and bore no trace of expression on his small, regular features. He merely pointed to a book of prodigious size which lay open on the table." Now, he differs from other deities in the mythos in a number of different ways. Most of the outer gods are said to be exiled to the stars, such as Yog-Sothoth and Azathoth, and most of the Great Old Ones are sleeping and dreaming like Cthulhu. However, unlike them, Nyarlathotep is active and frequently walks the earth in the guise of a human being, usually a tall, slim, joyous man. Not just that, but he is said to have 1,000 other forms and manifestations, most reputed to be horrific and sanity blasting. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cthulhu. To quote Lovecraft in The Call of Cthulhu, "At the proper time, the secret priest would take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule of Earth. Then mankind would have become as the Great Old Ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated Old Ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom." Now, it may come as no surprise that Cthulhu is on our list, with the monster being the biggest Lovecraftian legend of them all. Cthulhu is a great old one of great power that lies in a depth-like slumber beneath the Pacific Ocean in the sunken city of R'lyeh. Throughout fiction, his most detailed descriptions are based on statues of the creation. One, constructed by an artist after a series of dreams, is said to have, I quote, "yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature. A pulpy tentacle head surmounted a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings. It is unknown how large the throng of those who worship the monster is, but his cult has many cells around the world. His followers are noted for chanting the horrid phrase, I quote, 'In his house R'lyeh dead, Cthulhu waits dreaming.' When the creature finally appears, the story says that the thing cannot be described, but is called the green sticky spawn of the stars. Cthulhu is depicted as having a worldwide cult that is centered in Arabia, with followers in regions as far-flung as Greenland and Louisiana. Coming in at number 5, Migo. The Migo are an extraterrestrial species from the planet Yog-Sothoth, which is often implied to be the dwarf planet Pluto. They are often described as winged creatures with large claws and heads covered in antennae. They are an advanced race having a particularly sophisticated grasp of surgical techniques and neuroscience. They are described as pinkish, fungoid, crustacean-like entities with a convoluted ellipsoid composed of pyramided fleshy rings and covered in antennae where a head would normally be. They are fundamentally alien with respect to earthly life, according to 2 reports in the original short story. Their bodies consist of a form of matter that does not occur naturally on Earth. It is also said that they typically communicate by changing the colour of their heads. However, they are oftentimes able to speak the human language. If not, they can modify their bodies to make them able to speak. The Migo can transport humans from Earth to Yog-Sothoth and back again by removing the subject's brain and placing it in a brain cylinder, which can be attached to external devices to allow it to see, hear, and speak. The Migo worship the Lovecraft gods, acting as servants to them throughout the various stories. In ancient times, they waged a war against the elder things on Earth before humans came into existence. Coming in at number 4, we have Ghast. To quote H.P. Lovecraft in Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, the Ghast, those repulsive beings which die in the light and which live in the vaults of Zin and leap on long hind legs like kangaroos. After a moment, something about the size of a small horse hopped out into the grey twilight, and Carter turned sick at the aspect of the scabrous and unwholesome beast, whose face is so curiously human despite the absence of a nose, forehead, and other important particulars. Ghasts are described as being humanoid creatures who dwell in the vaults of Zin, where they are often hunted by the Gugs. Gugs are a species of creatures featured in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. They are large, black-furred beasts with vertically opening fanged jaws. Their 2 eyes protrude from either side of their head, and their limbs terminate in 2 paws each. Honestly, these dudes are downright terrifying. Anyway, back to Ghasts. Their language appears to consist of coughing gutturals. They also appear to travel in packs, as Randolph Carter meets a group of 15. Together, they seemingly manage to take down a Gug. Coming in at number 3, Kassogtha. Kassogtha is not only Cthulhu's second bride, but also his sister, who bore him the twin daughters Cthulhu and Cthulhu, who vaguely resemble their stepsister Cthulhu. Yeah, the family is a mess, and surprisingly, incest seems to be a minor horror in the works of Lovecraft. However, this family is a little too much for me. Kassogtha appears as a huge mass of writhing, coiled tentacles which are capable of extending to astonishing length, thus ensuring that the prey cannot escape or conceal themselves. While the rest of her capabilities are ill-defined, she is known to poison the waters that she inhabits. Typically regarded as the lesser Old One, she is also said to be particularly violent, to where even the great Cthulhu struggles against her to prove his strength. Coming in at number 2, we have Night-Gaunts. To quote H.P. Lovecraft in The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, but Carter preferred to look at them than at his captors, which were indeed shocking and uncouth black things with smooth, oily, whale-like surfaces, unpleasant horns that curved inwards towards each other, bat wings whose beating made no sound, ugly prehensile paws, and barbed tails that lashed needlessly and disquietingly. And worst of all, they never spoke or laughed and never smiled, because they had no faces at all to smile with, but only a suggestive blankness where a face ought to be. All they ever did was clutch and fly and tickle. That was the way of Night-Gaunts. Now, Night-Gaunts are a species of flying creatures inhabiting Earth's dreamlands. They are described as having, like I said, smooth whale-like skin, long slender humanoid bodies, curving horns, leather bat-like wings, and a blank expanse of flesh where a face would be. They are said to serve many gods and often capture people climbing the mountains in the dreamlands. According to Lovecraft, they were inspired by the nightmares he had in his youth. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Dagon. Dagon is a deity who presides over the Deep Ones, an amphibious humanoid race indigenous to Earth's oceans. His first appearance was in the Lovecraft short story Dagon, and is mentioned extensively throughout the mythos. He is a great old one and the consort of Mother Hydra. The legend is worshipped in the mythos by the esoteric Order of Dagon, a secret cult based in Innsmouth. Now, he is noted as being of enormous size and is worshipped as a deity by the aforementioned cult of both humans and Deep Ones. Supposedly immortal, Dagon's longevity may very well be attributed to his fraternization with the Starspawn, species that have a physical similarity to the Great Old One Cthulhu, who sometimes select formidable specimens from a given species to protect, nurture, and empower for reasons known only to them. Now, Dagon only physically appears in the short story Dagon, in which he erupts out of the ocean to embrace an unholy monolith. However, he leaves a huge hole in the mythos, with his children being the ones extensively featured going forth. It has been said that Lovecraft based Dagon on the ancient Mesopotamian deity of the same name, who was a god of fish, fishing, and fertility. Now, this legend also exists outside of the world of Lovecraft, with the creature also existing in the world of the Witcher card game, in which his abilities allow him to create harmful weather effects on the opponent's side of the board. It was also the name of the Philistine idol in the Old Testament in the Bible.
Number 5 on this list is that Lovecraft was never human. Lovecraft may have looked human on the exterior, he may have even spoke the same language as us, eaten the same foods as us, but he was never actually from our species. If you look up the work of H.P. Lovecraft, there is one resounding word that comes to mind to describe it: weird. And that's not a knock against his stories, they're great, but even diehard fans will admit that they're weird at their core. A lot of the creatures that he describes in his stories have forms that us humans can't even recognize. Yog-Sothoth, for instance, is a completely incomprehensible being that defies visualization. That's really cool to think about, but let's piece that back to Lovecraft. Maybe that's the way that he saw humans. Maybe all of these creatures that came from his mind were just representations of us. Because he wasn't human, he couldn't even understand what we were as a species. We can go further with this too. Lovecraft is noted as hating sex. His wife was even reported as saying that the very mention of the word sex seemed to upset him. Now, I completely understand that sex isn't for everyone, and just because you may not enjoy it doesn't mean that you're not human at all. But that's also your wife who's come out and said that. Lovecraft also had a deep fascination with science, especially space. For a long time, it said that he wanted to be an astronomer. Even when he was dying of cancer, he was recording every piece of data in his journal. Is it possible that maybe he was so fascinated with space and science because he knew that he wasn't actually human and was looking for some kind of other life form? Was he actually just another being in disguise? Is it possible that the stuff he was writing about were memories or representations of what his species actually was? We probably won't ever know, but I guess that's what makes it an urban legend to begin with. Number 4 on this list is that Lovecraft was actually possessed. Now, whether he was possessed by a demon, a ghostly spirit, or potentially even one of the creatures that he wrote about, that's unknown. The general thought is, though, that this being was inherently evil and was trying to take control of Lovecraft his whole life. We get this urban legend from some things that happened to Lovecraft the man rather than Lovecraft the writer. For instance, it's said that Lovecraft was riddled with horrible night terrors. Night terrors are different than nightmares. Night terrors are far more vivid than nightmares, and they cause the person who's experiencing them to physically move their bodies, scream, and attempt to escape what feels like a walking dream. People who get them have even been known to walk around in a nightmarish sleepwalk trying to get out of the prison in their mind. These night terrors are often linked to people who are dealing with a demonic possession as well. A demon will torment you in your sleep, and your brain will try to do anything it can to get out of that reality. It's possible that he was possessed by some creature as well based on what happened to his parents. H.P. Lovecraft was born into a well-off family, but that changed almost immediately after he came into the world. Winfield Scott Lovecraft, H.P.'s father, was committed to a mental hospital when H.P. was only 3. He apparently had developed some very bad psychosis and could no longer discern his reality. He lost his mind and only a few years later died in that hospital. His mother, Sarah Susan Phillips Lovecraft, also ended up in the same mental institute several years later and died there as well. Potentially this demon possessing Lovecraft had somehow affected his parents and slowly deteriorated their minds. It's a stretch for sure, but when we pivot over to some of the deeply disturbing things that Lovecraft had written about in his career, I can certainly see how it's plausible. Number 3 on this list is that Lovecraft received visions from eldritch entities. If you don't know what those are, then a Monsters fan page says that this category consists of beings whose appearance the human mind cannot even begin to comprehend. A mainstay of Howard Phillips Lovecraft's work, where the term arguably originated, these entities conform to no rules, patterns, or laws as the human race recognizes them. Some of the well-known eldritch entities in the Lovecraftian universe are Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, and Shoggoth. A popular urban legend is that these beings didn't just come from H.P.'s imagination, but they were actually communicating with him the whole time. Let's take Cthulhu for instance. Cthulhu is an eldritch entity that is said to be in a deep slumber at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. It's locked away in a sunken city and it's waiting for the day to wake up and get free again. Even though it's in this slumber, it's believed that Cthulhu's mind is still working and functional. Now, one of Cthulhu's main abilities is the power to communicate telepathically with people. It's thought that potentially that's where all this stuff came from. Everything in the Lovecraftian universe is actually real and true to life, and H.P. Lovecraft was chosen to inform the human race about it. This entity communicated with him telepathically for his whole life, and he simply wrote what was being told to him. Now this begs the question, why H.P. Lovecraft? And maybe because this being knew that he was a good writer and would be able to take what they tell him and put it to the page. Maybe they knew that he had just the type of mind that would listen to this voice and trust it. Maybe it was just all random and a being like Cthulhu could have just as easily picked you or me. It's hard to say for certain, but if this theory is correct, then we may still have our chance of being chosen, because it means that everything is real and Cthulhu is possibly just a boat ride away. Number 2 on this list is that Lovecraft was clinically insane. Now I want you to think back to some of the entries on this list that I've already talked about and some of the things that he did. Now start to connect them with the possibility of insanity. It starts to make a little bit of sense, huh? Lovecraft was always classified as a super weird guy. Really eccentric, out there with crazy ideas, stuff that your typical person wouldn't think about. Now this by no means makes him clinically insane, but it apparently does run in the family. It's been proven that mental illness is something that can be passed down generation to generation and that genetics are involved. And as I mentioned earlier, both of his parents ended up going to a mental institute in their lives and then ultimately dying there. Not only would that incident of them going there have been very draining on H.P.'s mental state, but also that he may be more susceptible to mental illness just based on his family. It's also said that H.P. Lovecraft inspired the stories of Batman. Is it possible that the biggest inspiration that he gave to those stories though wasn't Batman or the world of Batman, but potentially the Joker, or some of the other famous insane Batman villains? Arkham Asylum is filled with clinically insane, eccentric Batman villains, and maybe there's a reason why that was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Also, in the previous entry we talk about how eldritch entities could potentially be speaking to him. Well, what if he only thought that they were, but they actually weren't? What if he truly believed that someone like Cthulhu was speaking to him, but really that was just another voice in his head? Were all of these entities voices in Lovecraft's mind? Maybe that's why an eldritch entity can't be comprehended by a human eyeball, because it was only ever in his brain. Next time you pick up a Lovecraft novel, give it a read with this in mind. you might discover a thing or two that others have missed. Number 1 on this list is that the necronomicon is real. I'm going to read off Sarah McLean's answer on Quora to describe to you what the Necronomicon is. The Necronomicon is the most dangerous book known to man. It's an ancient grimoire written by Abdul al-Harad and is full of disturbing rituals and spells to summon the Great Old Ones. The Great Old Ones are eldritch outer gods that are more terrible than humanity can conceive. Just encountering them will drive you to madness. Now that's what our Quora user had to say about this, but the one thing though is that this is all fictional. The Necronomicon is exactly how Sarah described it, except it was written about by H.P. Lovecraft in part of the Cthulhu mythos. Therefore, it's a fictional book that was never actually created, or at least that's what people believe. Now you can buy rip-off versions of the Necronomicon on Amazon or other bookstores, but none of them will have been written by H.P. Lovecraft himself. However, there is an urban legend that H.P. Lovecraft actually wrote the Necronomicon before he passed away, and there is a single manuscript out there somewhere. This would be roughly a 700-page document going into depth on how to summon these Great Old Ones. This text would probably be cursed, and maybe the reason that we haven't even seen it before is because those who read it don't last long enough to show the world. H.P. Lovecraft sounds like the type of person who would want a legacy surrounding him, and writing a single text of this ancient grimoire for the world to find, that's exactly the way to do it.
Adam Jenks said, never thought I would say this. Being through what I have been through in my life, this list is actually scary, Lucy. You got me. Well, you're very welcome. I'm not here just making subpar scares, am I? But thank you. Raybert McFadrian said, last time I was this early was before all the cringy Lucy comments started. That was early then. DMB Land said, Lucy, would you and Keegan be willing and or able to do a horror movie watch party kind of thing with your fans while we're all in lockdown? Honestly, I'd be so down to do that, but I think Keegan's scared to come near me because of the leg incident, you know. He's holding on to his last one. He doesn't want to break that one. But no, I'd be down to do it. I'm down to do anything at this point. Entertain me. Ray Denny said, my horror queen, you wouldn't catch me going in a basement. There's not enough liquor in the entire universe to make me go in one. I don't know, maybe after some liquor, I might go in one. But honestly, don't like basements unless they're furnished. And by furnished, I mean better look like a living room down there, otherwise I'm not going. Your_worst_nightmare said, I'm here to watch some scary videos, and by the way, this channel is amazing. Oh, welcome. You have found scary videos. And thank you for appreciating the channel. Cherry Finkbiner said, missing you, Lucy. Missing what life used to be. Honestly, same. I miss being in the studio. I miss being on camera. I miss life. I miss going outside. I miss going to bars. I miss drinking. I miss going to bars. I miss staying at bars all night. Then I miss going to the studio, and then I miss going to bar. Maybe that's too many bars. Carrie Ann said, this channel is so underrated. Love it. Well, shucks. Thank you, Carrie Ann. GL Prime 2814 said, don't forget the curse of James Dean's spider, the car he was driving when he had his fatal accident. Pretty easy to guess what happened after that, but just in case you do not already know, the car was supposedly cannibalized after the incident, and every car that received a part from it also met a violent end. I did know about that curse. Yeah, the car was scrapped and pieces were sent to people. People wanted to buy parts of the car, and those people that did, well, they died a horrible death. Chris Nunn said, he who disturbs Lucy's tomb shall be dragged to hell for eternity. Ain't that the truth? Don't even come near my tomb. Don't even touch it. LPS Johnson Johnson said, I'm very superstitious and wary of angering the one named Lucy. Those that have are never heard from again. Much love and respect. Keep up the great work. That is very true. There's a reason no one speaks about crossing me, because those who cross me disappear. Red Comrade of Steel 1974 said, Lucy McPhee, when I first saw you in Top 5 Scary Videos, I was cursed to watch you as a host until the end of times. You're welcome. Kimmy said, what's the movie in the beginning? Well, Kimmy, the movie was The Ritual. It is a great movie.
The Mad Arab, oh my gosh, Arab? Yes, the Mad Arab, words! The Mad Arab. Chris, I'm getting pissed off right now. I'm just gonna skip that.